It's a spiritual war. If you turn a blind eye, you get more than you bargained for.
Is there a little light at the end, a glimmer of light at the end of our tunnel?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think Trump is doing some very good work domestically. He's uncovering the deep state corruption that's been going on in things like foreign aid and the CIA and the FBI. He's really digging down, and I think that's extremely welcome. And it's something which we need to do in this country, as everybody knows, because our country is as corrupt as deep state was in the United States. And I know the United States reasonably well. I visited over 35 states in my time in the last decade or so. And I've met a lot of people in Washington. And so I have a little bit of knowledge about it, although I don't pretend to be an expert on American affairs, but I'm, not totally ignorant of these matters. So I think there is some light at the end of the tunnel on that side, on domestic agendas, and this is good. There is some danger with Trump on his foreign policy, which is still basically Washington based. It's the problem with, and I've got some very good American friends, some very dear American friends, make no mistake, and they come to stay with me in England, and I'm glad they do, and they're very nice, and indeed they actually agree with me. One of the problems that we have with America is that they don't understand foreign policy at all. Any of them, doesn't matter whether they're Democrats or whether they're Republicans. The level of scholarship, I have lectured at American universities on various matters, and I'm a member of the Mises Institute down there in Alabama at the Auburn University. Their knowledge of European history is almost zero. It's almost zero. They don't understand anything. And even their I'm not talking about necessarily Joe Sixpack. I am talking about the college professors in the United States. Simply totally ignorant, and some of the stuff they come out with, is from an academic perspective, and I speak as a military historian and a graduate of the Royal College of Defence Studies and various other things, that some of their very senior people come out with is mind-bogglingly stupid. So I would hope if Trump can somehow stay out of wars, stay out of fomenting wars, stay out of avoiding perhaps a global conflict. And of course, the trigger points at the moment are the Ukraine, which I think he's going to get out of. I hope he's going to get out of. But of course, you have to bear in mind that he was very responsible for getting the United States into the Ukraine war in his term of office. But people have forgotten that. He stepped up the military presence and the CIA presence, so on and so forth, in the Ukraine in his term of office. So no good has come of it. It's a war that should never have happened, which he's now saying the war should never have happened. But oh, come on, Trump, you can't just say that. You had a good big hand in it. It's not as simple as that. But I think he's also got some very difficult advisors. Kellogg, for example. And some of the senior military personnel and some of the senior politicians in Congress don't understand that the war is now lost. The war is lost. The Russian Federation has won. They now have an army of 1.5 million men, very highly equipped, with better equipment than NATO. And I know what I'm talking about. I was a liaison officer for NATO for years and years. I'm not the man in the pub. I'm not the man at the golf club. I do know something about this. Their kit is better than ours. They're more advanced, and they have something which, and I know there'll be old soldiers watching this because they go to your events, and they know a bit too. They will know that there is no substitute for combat experience. So the Russian Federation now have hundreds of thousands of soldiers who have combat experience. And if you remember, in historically in Northwest Africa, after the Eighth Army had come across after the Battle of Alamein to drive Rommel out of North Africa, the Americans landed in Operation Torch on the Moroccan coast. And a lot of the viewers to this will know that because they'll know their history, I'm sure. And the Americans got a very bloody nose indeed when the Germans turned round and attacked them when they just lost the Battle of Alamein. And that's the difference between combat experience. The Americans didn't have combat experience and they got badly beaten. But they got their combat experience when they fought their way up in Italy and Normandy and places like this, and of course in the Pacific. But you don't make soldiers in a classroom. You don't make soldiers on a training exercise. You really do have to have combat experience. And the other flashpoint, of course, is the Middle East, which is now complete bedlam. And if the Americans don't understand European history, they're going to be completely and totally buggered with the Middle East because it's almost incomprehensible. There are so many factions. And I think if Trump wants to go down in his second term as a great president, and I think he still could, incidentally, he wants to bring everybody home. America does not need to have 200 overseas bases. It doesn't need $1 trillion defense budget. It doesn't need 200,000 overseas military in penny packets all over the country. It doesn't need an expansion of NATO. Come home. The Americans need to go home. And if George Washington were to come back now, that's the advice he'd be giving them. George Washington would say, the rest of the world's got nothing to do with us. And so we just have to see how it unfolds. Domestically, Trump's made a very good start, and I'll concede that to him gladly. We normally do. You're quite right, Liz, earlier when you said we normally pick up these things from America eventually. You're quite right. We normally do. But we have never had, frankly, an out-and-out communist at number 10 Downing Street. We've had some socialists, we've had some chancers, we've had some ne'er-do-wells, we've had some wrong-uns, especially recently. But we haven't had anybody quite like Starmer, who is frankly a very bad man. And his cabinet are just plain stupid. They're straight out of the fifth form debating society at a rather failing state school. That's about the level. And I tell you what always rather amuses me with them is the vowel A. They cannot pronounce any of them the vowel A. They replace it with I. So it's interesting listening to them. They can't even master the Queen's English. I love regional accents. I think they're the backbone of our country, regional accents. I love them. Geordies, Brummies. I'm down here in Cornwall at the moment. I just love it. But these people don't have any knowledge of anything, including their own language. And I find that and they don't like it. And they don't like our history. They don't like our institutions. And they put people in to places now of authority and very great power who really hate this country. And this country can't be beaten from anybody outside. We've had 1,000 years to prove that, but it can be collapsed from the inside. And that's what's happening today, as we all know.
Godfrey, we do indeed. And, I'd like you to talk a little bit now about what's going on in the Treasury, because you've got Rachel from Accounts, as somebody so rightly called her. She's lied on her CV. Not that that would make any difference. I know a lot of people who've had, if you like, a sort of fairly poor CV, but have got a very good IQ. But this woman has got no IQ. She's obviously got no grasp on basic economics, because even I, who I'm not in your league, but we talked about this earlier, if you're going to put expenses up on employers, it stands to reason that if they're on a very low margin, that they're going to have to lose people. So we take people out of the workplace and put them on benefits. How is that going to increase the GDP of the country and get the work rate up, etc. So would you like to talk about the state we're in?
Yes, I think I don't believe that you need to be a doctorate in economics to know that if you increase the tax on employment, you're going to affect people who are employed. I mean, it really isn't frightfully difficult to comprehend. Now, to help people a little bit, although I know your audience needs no help on these matters because they already know what's happening, but I'm down here in Cornwall and I was in Newlyn a few days ago, which is just down the coast from where I'm staying. And of course, it's one of the biggest fishing ports in the country, not as big as it used to be, and nothing is these days. There's Peterhead, I think, and Newlyn. Sadly, we gave all our fishing away, as you know, to the European Union. Leaving that aside, I went there to get some fish in Newlyn. There's a fishmonger down there, big fishmonger, and we have a small holding in the middle of rural Yorkshire. So we don't often get fresh fish. It's rather difficult for us to get fresh fish. So along we went to get some. And I always talk to people because as a financial economist, I like to talk to as many people as I can because that's grassroots. And that's where economics starts. You don't get it from a Daily Telegraph leader because by the time it's in the newspaper, it's too late. It's too late. So you have to speak to people on the ground. I made the point of speaking to quite a number in Newlyn. And the lady in the fishmonger, who was a skilled lady, she was skilled at her work, as we got our fish. She's just been put, and of course, very fine margins. Small companies, very small companies, and even middle-sized companies work on very fine margins. She's just had her hours cut. She's had 8 hours knocked off her week because of employers' national insurance. Now, let's say that she's on £10 an hour. I'm just pulling that figure out of the air, but it won't be that far away down here in Newlyn for that kind of job. It ought to be more in the freezing cold, believe me, but it's not. Let's say 10. So she's lost 8 hours. She's lost £80 a week. And I would suggest, I don't know the lady well, obviously, but she could ill afford to lose £80 a week, bless her cotton socks, working hard, betrayed, while they sit in the town hall on index-linked everything's an unsackable. Makes me so cross. And she was telling me that just across from her fish shop, there is, because in Newlyn, some of the work there is restoring the boats and fixing the boats and mechanically sorting out the such fishing boats as we've got left. And they had, she told me, I think I might remember, they had 8. The little business across the road had 8 fully trained marine engineers. They've just laid 3 off. Now, these are highly skilled men. These are highly skilled marine engineers, hands-on chaps. They've just lost 3 because being on fine margins, as it is, and especially at this time of the year, increasing the tax on employment just pushed them over. They can't afford 8 now, so they've got to get by on 5 in order to make ends meet. Now, of course, you and I would know that kind of thing. We would have anticipated that kind of thing, but there's not a single cabinet member who's had a proper job. None of them have actually worked in commerce. It's always the same thing, straight into politics out of university, and they're telling us all what to do. Not one single cabinet member has been in commerce. This is extraordinary. This is absolutely appalling. And I have to say, the last lot weren't that much better. Don't let's pretend the last lot were much better. They were a bunch of stupid gangsters as well. And so it goes on. And Cameron was an idiot. And all the previous Conservative, okay, they weren't out and out communists, they were just plain stupid. But the result's the same, and always reminds me a little bit of Siegfried Sassoon and his wonderful poem of the First World War. They slugged up to he's a cheery old card, said Harry to Jack, as they slugged up to Arras with rifle and pack, but he did for them both with his plan of attack. And we've got that kind of leadership, and we've had it for over a decade.
So Godfrey, what do we do about this? This is the whole thing. We're looking at I'm looking with several people, as you know, and you've been looking at different alternatives now. We can't go on like this. It's not fair on the British people, the working person. We're bringing people over, we're giving them, we've talked today about millions being given. We give them Xboxes and teach them yoga, put them on yoga classes and teach them to be disc jockeys. They shouldn't be here in the first place. So we've got millions going out all over the place. What are we going to do?
Well, it's very difficult, and I know it's always easy to cut. One needs to be positive on these things, and my wife's always telling me off for only pointing out what disasters are befalling us, and I keep on trying to find something good. It's getting progressively more difficult. What I think, okay, that's just what I think. It's a little bit ephemeral, but if groups like yours and my blogs and people like me and Jim Ferguson and David Curtin, there's a lot of very good people. Our voices are generally speaking small, but don't forget they're getting bigger and legacy media is getting smaller. So inch by inch we're moving forward, which is why they're so frightened of social media and they want to uh, cancel it as best they can and censor it as best they can. But my experience over many years and as a historian is that things go in cycles. There'll be a cycle. And I saw the disaster of the 1970s administration from both the Conservatives and Labour. And I saw us in the 80s turn it around to a very large extent. Mistakes were made, of course, I know they were. But generally speaking, the 80s turned it round. And I remember a lawyer, I was having a pint with a lawyer. I'm going back to the end of the 1980s or early 90s. I was in a pub with him, a very, very good lawyer and a very, very great character. And he said to me, well, if you couldn't score in Maggie's Britain, you must have been a complete moron. And it was true. Everybody made money. Everything was good. There were mistakes made. Of course, there were mistakes made. But generally speaking, the economy was bowling along fairly well. And when we had problems, the Falklands, for example, or that, we had a patriotic prime minister. We haven't had one of those for long. Somebody who actually believes in this country. So cyclically, that came back. So that was good. So if we go on putting ideas into the pot, if we go on saying things and demonstrating things, which then become popular in people's beliefs, the next cycle round means that people will know what to do. Now, give an example. I've just done a very long piece for Going Postal magazine, which is coming out very soon, on reform, on the Reform Party. And I've been explaining, and I've given, I think it's something like 50 manifesto points for reform, which they should be putting out very quickly, all doable and radical. And I've been reading up on reform. I've just finished Elizabeth Longsford's Pillar of State, Duke of Wellington, while I've been down here, my reading matter, and the reform bills, and of course, going back to the Restoration. So if you look at the Restoration and you look at the reform of the 1830s, you look at how things can be turned round, but it's not done without upheaval. There will be some upheaval. And it's going to have to be tough, and we need a party coming forward with a vision. Now, the problem at the moment, and it might be too early to say, and I don't like to be critical all the time, but it seems that's the way it seems to go. At the moment, the reform leadership has no vision. It doesn't have vision. It's penny pinching. There's some good people. There's Rupert Lowe, who's reasonably good at these things. I rather like Lee Anderson because I think it's time we got an ordinary working man in number 10 Downing Street, frankly. Somebody with a bit of old-fashioned Midlands common sense, which you get from Lee Anderson. So I like those two guys. But generally speaking, where's the vision? The leadership is already hedging on repatriating illegal immigrants. I mean, crikey, if reform isn't for repatriating illegal immigrants, what is it for? What's it for? It seems to me at the moment it's just looking Tory light. Vote reform, because we're not Labour and we're not Conservative. You need more than that. You can't put yourself forward and say, well, I'm not somebody else. It's like going out with a girl and find a girl and she can say, okay, I'm a bit fat, but I don't smell. Betty over there, she smells. Well, you can't work things out like that, can you? You have to have a vision. You have to say, this is what we're going to do, and it's going to annoy people. But at the moment, from what I see from Reform, it wants to win over legacy media. It seems they want the approbation of the BBC, of the Guardian editorials. You won't get it. You won't get it. You'll never get it. What you've got to do is say, I don't give a shit about legacy media. I don't care about the BBC. This is what I stand for. And if you believe in this, this is what we need to do. And I think if they do that, if they trim and they hedge and they and but on the one hand, on the other, we've had on the one hand and on the other hand from the Conservative Party. We don't want any more of that. So, yes, I think what we can do is, if we can persuade Reform to grow some balls, that would be good. That would be good. And there's still time. There's still a few years. Not 4. No. Starmer won't last beyond Easter of 2026 because the corruption will all come out. Everything that's been going on will come out. And he will either have to go to, I think he'll have to go to the country, or the Labour Party will completely split. So we'll have to see. But I would say that anybody who wants to stand as a political party doesn't need to be looking 3 or 4 years ahead. It needs to be looking 2 years ahead, and they need to get their act together. But that means leadership. That means tough leadership. It's not there.
I know. I totally despair, Godfrey. You know me probably well enough now to know that I just totally despair because we haven't got somebody that says we're going down, whether you like Maggie or not. Many people say, and I disagreed, that when she put the miners out to grass, I hated that, because when you put a load of people out to grass, you need to give them something alternative to work for. And if your constituency was in the Welsh Valleys, which part of mine was, you will see that in the mining towns of Wales, there's nothing else that they could do. There's no alternative. So to put these people out, no matter what, like everything else, it's not the men on the ground that are the problem. It's perhaps the unions, you could say, with the problem, etc. But to put these people out to grass, I totally disagreed with, without giving them something else to do. We've done it in Afghanistan. We took the poppy farms away from the Afghans. We took heroin and poppy growing away from them. But we didn't say, we'll grow this instead, so you'll still get your same income. So we've got to look far more pragmatically than we do. And we haven't got anybody. I'd love to stand up there and do it myself. We haven't got anybody that will stand up there and say, this is what we're going to do, this is what the country needs, and this is how we're going to do it. And there isn't anybody.
I know at the moment it's a shame, and I think what we need is if we get the leadership, or whichever leader of any political party, say, what's your vision? What's your vision? You have the floor for 10 minutes. What's your vision? I could do it. I could give you the vision of the country in 10 minutes. No problem at all. But I'm 75 now. And I spent half my life trying to get a fake Brexit. Gave up my directorships and everything else, gave up my business to do that. Well, that's okay, because I'm a happy little bunny anyway. It doesn't matter. But we need somebody who has a vision, knows how to articulate it, and it's got to be realistic. And my blueprint is coming out on Going Postal for everybody to see. It will be on my website for anybody who wants to look at my website. There's something I think got 60 bullet points. It's probably nearer 55, but it doesn't matter. And I think if we had a political party that was prepared to implement 30, I think it would take the country forward in a huge leap, in a leap. And we've seen the country do it before over history. We've seen it. We've seen it before. We've seen Britain do it, and we can go back 400, 500, 600 years. And we always bub to the top. We've only got one very serious problem at the moment. It's always been just us. It's always been just us. So we can bounce back as a nation. But we are so few. You talk about the valleys. We have more Muslims in the country now than we have Welshmen. There are more Muslims than Welshmen. It's a whole principality. This is the problem that we have. And so before anybody says, oh, there's nothing wrong with Muslims and all that isn't the point. The point is us. We have stood as a United Kingdom for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years because we are we. This is what we do. And it has been significantly contributed to by some immigrants, of course. And I wouldn't dispute that for one moment either. But the sort of numbers that we're dealing with now means that we are now in a sort of situation like the ancient Britons were when everybody else was arriving, the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Jutes and the Danes. They're all now in North Wales speaking Welsh, which is old British, if you will, ancient British. And we're being pushed out. And I live in Yorkshire now, where I live in the East Riding of Yorkshire, for example, and the housing estates that are being built there are now being filled up from people from West Yorkshire because they're being driven out of their communities by that sort of pressure of immigration of all sorts. So they're coming over here. And so we have ghettos now in West Yorkshire, ghettos in parts of the Midlands. And a country divided cannot stand. And we are now divided. And it's been caused by politicians who hate us. This isn't an accident. It's not an accident.
No, Godfrey, I totally agree with you. And the people that are with us here today in Thetford, or will be with us on the day in Thetford, will all totally agree with you. I will gladly look at your 55, and if you think we can only implement 30, I would say we probably could implement more. Please send me over the details, and well, let's look. We've got to come at this in a totally different way. We can't go on, and whether it's too late or not, there are some politicians, some old type politicians, who would say we've left it too late. I don't agree with that. I think we can turn it round, but we've got to do it now.
I totally agree with you. And we've got to be ruthless, I'm afraid.
Totally. Well, Maggie was ruthless, and there are some of us women that are in many ways very kind, but also can be ruthless when you see what you've got to do and you've got a clear plan and a clear vision. This is your right about reform. When the two things that upset me greatly was the people that went on the march in London, 60-odd thousand people, when Richard Tice called them that lot, not once but twice. And it was that lot that put Richard Tice where he is now. That upset me. And then for Nigel to keep saying that he wants Conservative councillors to come over, not councillors, Conservative councillors. You're right, it's Tory light.
Well, I know, I totally agree with you. And bringing Charlie Mullins tells you really all you need to know, doesn't it? What on earth was that all about? And why did they call those patriots with Union Jacks all marching that lot? Tice is a liability. Tice desperately wants to be in the Conservative Party. And I suspect Nigel does really too.
It's very sad. Godfrey, I can't thank you enough for giving us your time in Cornwall. And we'll try and work round you for our next event. If you're off to South America, I suspect that'll be, well, we're on our next event, but certainly later this year, we'll have you back in person. Thank you.
I'll look forward to that. I always enjoy it tremendously.
That's wonderful. Godfrey, thank you.